Chapter 401. Hell! Alaric was at loss for words. He truly didn't do anything this time. He didn't even touch the two women sent by Hershey to serve him. Ivana, I didn't. He wanted to say that he didn't do it, but the words were stuck in his mouth. Ivana's face was cold. It was like the first time he had seen her during that cold snowy night. My power amplifies my senses as long as trees or plants around me. You can't hide that disgusting stench from me. When she first met Alaric, his smell wasn't like this. But now, she could smell the strong scent of blood on him. She could also detect the faint smell of women which wouldn't be there unless there was close contact. You aren't the same man anymore, Alaric, Ivana muttered, her eyes shaking with anger and disappointment. Alaric grabbed his chest. Her words hurt him, but they were all true. He was no longer the same man he used to be. His expression suddenly became calm. You are right. It seems like I have become a different person. He strolled and pushed open the window and asked, "What do you see outside?" Ivana didn't respond, but she could see a group of elves doing their respective tasks. She also saw children playing by the river. While staring at the peaceful scenery, Alaric muttered, "To bring this kind of peace to my family and my nation, I need power. Even if I turn into a demon in pursuit of this strength, I will not hesitate." He turned around and stared deeply into her eyes. "Tell me, will you do the same for your kingdom?" Ivana frowned and fell into deep thought. Would she be willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of their kingdom? While she was ruminating on his words, Alaric's voice drifted. "If you see a future filled with bloodshed, your family and friends dying before you, your territory, your nation crumbling before you, if you see those things with your own eyes, you will understand my words." She was stunned. She looked at him and studied his expression. The look on his face, his eyes, and his temperament. Everything suddenly changed. It was no longer the kind-hearted and chivalrous man that she once knew, but a man with a scarred and torn heart. It was as if he had seen the end of the world. His tired, soulless eyes seemed to have witnessed the darkness and hell on earth. His expression wasn't an act. This emotion was something that he had left hidden in his heart. How can you show this kind of expression? Just what happened? She felt an inexplicable sense of sadness. Suddenly, Alaric took off the bracelet given by his mother and placed it on the side table. "I will leave this here. In the far future, you can look at it and remember the good times you spent with a foolish man." It was one of his most important equipment, an item capable of giving its wearer a second life. However, Alaric was willing to give it to her as a farewell gift. After saying those words, he left the treehouse without looking back. Jerk! Ivana stared at the bracelet with tears running down her face. 3 weeks later, all the barbarian tribes who had decided to ally with the elves had already sent their troops to the Greenwood Kingdom. More than 100 barbarian tribes sent their soldiers. Each tribe sent about several hundred to a few thousand warriors. The total number of barbarian warriors gathered was around 170,000. In addition to the Elven Kingdom's troops and the warriors sent by House Silversword, they had around 200,000 warriors. At this moment, all these warriors had already gathered outside the Greenwood Kingdom in preparation to march towards the monster colony. With the number of troops we have, we can destroy that monster colony with ease. That's true. I thought this battle would be difficult, but it seems like it would be a breeze. We have Commander Vulcan on our side. We also have Lord Lucas, who is a mythical knight. Don't forget about that catastrophe-grade tamed beast. The warriors chatted among themselves while the military officers were discussing their final plans before the march. Riding on their horses, Lucas, Garandel, and a bald barbarian were talking about something else. "Why do you think those two aren't talking with each other?" Garandel asked, his voice filled with concern. Lucas let out a sigh as he responded, "That I don't know. I tried asking my son, but he refused to tell me anything." The bald barbarian clicked his tongue as he said, "Just leave them be. Which one of us didn't experience the same thing during our youth? Back then, I also quarreled a lot with my wife." Hearing this, Lucas and Garandel chuckled. I didn't know you could say something helpful, Vulcan. Lucas grinned while staring at his friend's face. Vulcan was a member of a barbarian tribe called the Scaled Arm Tribe. All the members of this tribe inherently have black scales on their arms. These scales were as tough as refined steel, and they could even withstand the pressure of mana. When they reach adulthood, their scales would be as durable and strong as relic-level weapons. Vulcan crossed his arms and snorted at his words. You can worry about your children after this battle ends. It's about time we march. Commander Vulcan is right. Garandel nodded in agreement, his expression slowly hardening. Then let's set off. Lucas nodded. After making this decision, Garandel sent a signal to the elven military officers as he instructed. Sound the horns. We are leaving. Braham. The army marched as soon as the war horns sounded. Meanwhile, Alaric, who was riding Zephyr, suddenly jolted. This mission. Sir. Mission. Defeat the monster colony. Mission difficulty. Hell. A monster colony has been established 300 miles from the Greenwood Kingdom. It is growing increasingly powerful as the days pass. The number of monsters in this colony is still growing by the day. Defeat the monster colony. Rewards: 6,500 battle points, 1,000 EXP, 250 stat points, Transcendent Knight card X1, Random Trait Upgrade card X2, S-Rank Trait card X1. Penalty for failure, death. Chapter 402. Sending a team to scout the colony. Alaric's face fell. The most difficult mission he had ever gotten was only extreme rated. He had never once received a hell-rated mission. Even with the presence of Dad and Zephyr, the difficulty is still set to hell mode. What troubled him most was the reappearance of the death penalty upon failure. He thought that it wouldn't appear again, but here it was. Just what kind of creature is hiding in that monster colony? Should we abandon the mission? Sweat trickled down his face as he thought of countless scenarios. No, they won't believe me. I have no proof that a powerful creature is living in that place. Alaric frowned. I should try to warn them. Thinking about this, he instructed Zephyr to bring him to the front of the formation where Lucas and the commanders were located. Make way, he shouted to the warriors. Everyone gave way for them. No one dared to stop them from moving. Alaric, what are you doing here? Lucas frowned when he noticed his son approaching them. He was strict with military discipline, so he was a bit unhappy that Alaric left his assigned position. Seeing his father's displeased expression, Alaric saluted and said in a grim tone, My lord, I think we should send some scouts to properly investigate the monster colony. They had already sent teams to scout the periphery of the monster colony, but these teams didn't venture deeply. The information they had gathered might not be accurate, so Alaric was worried. We have already sent scouts to the colony to gather information, and the intel they sent back is mostly similar. Are you worried that there is something that they have missed? Lucas might be displeased, but he also trusted his son's instincts. Alaric nodded and expressed his thoughts. My lord, I have a bad feeling about this trip. I think it's best to send a stronger team to scout the colony. Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. He looked at Garandel and Vulcan, but both men didn't seem to have the intention of intervening. He let out a deep sigh and made his decision. Fine. You can select a maximum of 10 warriors to scout the colony. You can take your pick from anyone in the army. Hearing this, Alaric was relieved. As long as he could find proof that a terrible existence was there, they would be more prepared to face the monster colony. Thank you, my lord. He turned around and left to pick 10 warriors. Looking at his son's figure, Lucas rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Alaric rarely acts like this, and his instincts have never been wrong. We should be more cautious. Lucas and Vulcan nodded, their faces grave. They were aware that some gifted people had the ability to sense danger. They guessed that Alaric probably had this type of innate ability, so they didn't treat his words lightly. Being more cautious wouldn't do any harm. It might slow our march, but it is better to be safe. Vulcan said. That's true. It is possible that the scouts didn't discover everything about the colony. Garandel nodded with a frown. Information was crucial in war. A small error in information could lead to their downfall. It didn't take long for Alaric to pick the most suitable candidates. He had the appraisal trait, so he was able to discover which warriors were perfect to scout the enemy territory. In just a quarter of an hour, he selected 10 individuals from various groups, 7 from the barbarian tribes, 2 from the Elven Kingdom, and 1 from his troops. The warriors he selected were elite knights, and they all had agility attributes or speed-related traits. With their abilities, as long as they were careful, they would be able to escape any unexpected situation. The 10 of you will scout the monster colony. Your task is to gather information about the population of the colony. This is vital in the coming battle, so the information must be accurate. Also, I want you to check if there is a powerful creature hidden in the colony. Alaric announced the task of the chosen 10 warriors. Some of them furrowed their eyebrows, confused by his instructions. There were also a few who simply nodded without questioning the mission. Do you have any questions? Alaric scanned them one by one. Suddenly, one of them raised his hand and asked, "Your Highness." Everyone turned their gazes towards the owner of the voice. It was a barbarian warrior with nearly maxed agility. He also possessed an innate speed-related trait which made him the fastest among the 10. However, Alaric didn't hurry to make his decision. This scouting mission was dangerous, so he had to choose the best candidate to serve as the leader of the group. He inspected their attributes and traits one by one. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on one of them. It was an elven warrior with green hair and a pair of bluish eyes. He was slim and tall with handsome facial features. "What's your name?" "Alaric." "Just call me Varus, Your Highness." The elven warrior responded with a polite bow. Alaric nodded. "Varus here will be your team leader, so everyone must follow his commands during this reconnaissance mission." Everyone narrowed their eyes as they observed Varus from head to foot. They thought Alaric would choose the only human among them, but he chose a scrawny elf instead. They wondered why he made this decision. What was so special about this Varus guy? Alaric could see their skepticism, but he didn't bother to explain. He knew that Varus would show his abilities once the mission began. "Remember, don't engage in battle unless absolutely necessary," Alaric warned. "Rest assured, Your Highness. I will make sure that everyone returns unharmed," Varus promised. Alaric nodded, looking pleased by his words. "All right, I will leave everything in your hands. You may go." Varus and the rest of the team saluted him before they went separately from the army. Looking at their disappearing figures, Alaric mumbled to himself, "Quick thinking trait, that's quite rare." Chapter 403, Purple Mist Tree. Aldrin was one of the 10 warriors chosen to scout the monster colony. He had recently advanced to become an elite knight with the help of the near-limitless resources and rigorous training. Author's note: if you have forgotten about Aldrin, you can see him in the characters panel. Why did His Highness choose that elf to be our leader? Aldrin, curious, looked at Varus, the assigned leader of the 10-man scout team. From his observations, he wasn't the most physically gifted among them nor the most charismatic. The one who stood out the most in their team was a barbarian with wolf-like features. He looked no different than a normal human except that he had thick wolf fur on some parts of his body. He also possessed a pair of intimidating beastly eyes. Moreover, this barbarian warrior exuded the strongest aura among everyone in the team. Despite his confusion, Aldrin had full trust in Alaric's judgment. There must be something special about him, he thought to himself as he pulled his gaze from the elven warrior. This is no time to doubt my comrades. I should focus on the mission. Thinking about this, he carefully observed the surroundings for any possible threat. His sharp eyes roamed all over the place. When they traveled more than 50 miles, Varus instructed the team to get some rest. Their horses had been running at full speed, so the poor creatures were exhausted. It would be bad for the team if their mounts were in bad condition during the reconnaissance, so no one objected to Varus's decision. Throughout the whole trip, Aldrin kept his vigilance. He didn't even remove his hand from the handle of his spear. While they were setting up a temporary camp, someone suddenly approached him and said, "Relax, buddy. We are still far from the monster colony. You don't need to be so rigid." Aldrin turned his head. It was one of the barbarian warriors. Just like him, this guy was also an elite knight. Looking at the bow slung over his shoulder, Aldrin furrowed his eyebrows. Is the bow his primary weapon, or is it just a decoy? The barbarian warrior chuckled dryly when he noticed that Aldrin wasn't listening. He pointed at the insignia on Aldrin's chest and said, "You have that insignia, so you must be a warrior from House Silversword. I am Sandro, a member of the Green-Eyed Falcon tribe." Though the human was quite peculiar, he had a good impression of House Silversword. Aldrin nodded and replied, "I am Aldrin." He wanted to introduce himself as a newly promoted team leader of House Silversword, but he didn't want to come off as a boastful guy, so he decided not to mention it. "I will call you Sir Aldrin if you don't mind." Sandro smiled faintly. Aldrin nodded to express his assent. "What are you two doing over there?" A stern voice suddenly drifted into their ears. It was another member of the scout team, the second elven warrior, Leslie. "It's nothing, Dame Leslie. I'm just making friends with our team members, is all." Sandro laughed awkwardly. This elven warrior was the only woman in the group, but no one dared to underestimate her. This was because she possessed the second strongest aura after the barbarian with wolf features. Leslie stared deeply at them and instructed in a cold tone. "Instead of wasting time chatting, you two might as well check the perimeter." Hearing this, Sandro didn't hesitate for a second and acknowledged her command. "I understand." Aldrin was amused upon seeing him scurrying like a scared cat. "What a funny guy. What are you laughing about? You are not exempt from the task. Go and scout the area." Leslie's displeased voice echoed. Aldrin glanced at her and nodded. He then left without saying a word. So there are still arrogant elves like this woman. She seems to be the daughter of a high elf. No wonder she's got the temper. He didn't like Leslie's personality, but he still followed her instructions. It wouldn't be good for the team if he were to create conflict with the members. He climbed atop a massive tree and surveyed the surroundings with his keen perception. He found some monsters, but they weren't a threat to the group, so he decided to remain at the top of the tree to continue his observation. Suddenly, he saw one of their members rushing back to the camp with an urgent expression. Sensing that something was amiss, Aldrin jumped down from the tree to inquire about the situation. "What did you see out there?" Varys asked the man, his expression serious. The man took a deep breath before he responded in a grim tone. "A monster outpost. I saw a monster outpost." Hearing his words, everyone frowned and quickly gathered around him. "Are you sure? Where did you see it?" someone inquired. The man pointed in a certain direction. "Half a mile from that location, there is a big tree with strange purple fruits. The monster outpost is built on top of that tree." "Is he talking about the purple mist tree?" Leslie rubbed her chin while looking at Varys. "It must be the purple mist tree. It is the most conspicuous tree around here. The monsters must have chosen to build their outpost on top of it to keep an eye on its fruits." Varys agreed with her assessment. "What is this purple mist tree that you are talking about?" asked the barbarian warrior with wolf-like features. This man's name was Bane, and everyone believed that he was the strongest in the team. "I will explain it to you guys." Varys nodded and gave them a short introduction about the tree. According to him, the purple mist tree was a spiritual tree that produces an unusual elixir fruit, the purple mist fruit. When a peak knight apprentice consumed a mature purple mist fruit, they would immediately advance to become a knight. However, there was a problem. Each purple mist tree could only produce a maximum of 10 fruits every 10 years. "What? There's actually such a good thing here? Why didn't you guys send a team to safeguard the tree?" Everyone was confused. If it was so valuable, why did the Elven Kingdom not send its warriors to protect it? Looking at their baffled faces, Varys sighed and told them the truth. This area of the forest was originally the territory of a powerful monster pack. Their alpha was also a peak disaster-grade monster. "We did try to claim the tree, but the monster pack was fierce and they didn't fear death. After numerous losses, His Majesty decided to give up on the purple mist tree." While everyone was ruminating on his words, Varys added, There is no need for us to attack the outpost. Our mission is to scout the monster colony, so we shouldn't sidetrack and do anything unnecessary. He paused for a moment and scanned everyone's faces before he continued. We just need to avoid the outpost so we wouldn't be discovered. Bane stared deeply at him and nodded after a moment of silence. Fine, but I will send word to the main army about the outpost. Varys wasn't opposed to this. He also planned on informing the main army about the outpost to prevent them from sending word to the monster colony. An undiscovered monster outpost 50 miles from the Elven Kingdom. It seems like the Elven Kingdom's worries weren't unfounded, thought Aldrin, who was listening to their conversation. With this discovery, the group no longer dawdled. They gathered their belongings and took a detour to avoid detection from the outpost. Bane also sent a messenger bird to inform the main army about what they had discovered. Back to the main army. Alaric received the letter sent by the scouting team. He unrolled the letter and read the contents with a stern look. Purple mist tree? Is there something like that here? He hadn't seen this tree before, but he had encountered its fruits at an auction in his past life. They were very rare, and it was almost impossible to artificially grow them. I wonder if I can transplant this tree into our garden? Alaric fell into deep thought. Attacking the monster outpost is a bit risky, but the tree is quite tempting. In the end, he decided to inform his father about the purple mist tree. He told Lucas about the story, but the guy didn't seem to be interested in it. To a mythical knight, this tree was indeed insignificant. My lord, we have plenty of talented knight apprentices in our household. If they can have this fruit, they will save a few years. Alaric tried to persuade his father. Lucas frowned and thought for a moment. Just like Alaric had said, House Silversword had plenty of promising knight apprentices. Given enough time, they would become the next batch of elites for the household. However, it would take years of training before they could advance and become a full-fledged knight. After much deliberation, Lucas relented. All right, I give you my permission, but who are you going to send this time? He asked while looking at his son. I will be going there myself, Alaric replied confidently. Chapter 404. The 11th Dark Purple Fruit. Alaric didn't bring Zephyr with him since it was too big and conspicuous. Instead, he rushed towards the location on foot. With his speed, he could even run faster than some disaster-grade beasts. No mission is notified this time. What a pity. He volunteered to take care of this task because he hoped to receive a mission from the system, but he didn't get any notification. A few hours later, Alaric finally saw the purple mist tree. He wasn't familiar with its appearance, but based on the description and illustrations written in books, he could tell that this was what he was looking for. Moreover, he also discovered the monster outpost built atop the branches of the tree. Hold on. I thought this tree could only produce 10 fruits every decade. Then why is there an extra fruit? Alaric was confused. Hanging from one of the branches was a purple fruit which was significantly darker than the normal purple mist fruits. Furthermore, it was twice as big and it was wrapped in some kind of mana membrane. With one look, Alaric's instincts told him that this particular fruit was a treasure. Not bad. This trip is not wasted. As he moved closer to his target, Alaric removed all traces of his mana to prevent the monsters from discovering his presence. There are more monsters here than I thought, but the strongest is just an entry-level disaster-grade beast. We have plenty of warhorses that are stronger than it. He thought to himself as he stuck his body to a tree. There are about 50 fatal-grade orc warriors and 1 disaster-grade orc general. Alaric calmly assessed the enemy's strength and numbers while preparing his attack. Just as he was about to make his move, he saw the orc warriors dumping monster carcasses on the roots of the tree. What are they up to? Alaric was curious about their unusual actions. He decided to observe the situation. Why are they dumping monster corpses on? Just then, the roots of the tree suddenly moved like tentacles to grab the monster carcasses. The carcasses quickly shriveled up and were soon reduced to bones. Seeing this, Alaric was stunned. So they are using monster corpses to nourish the tree. Alaric had never heard of this nourishment method before. Much to his surprise, He could sense that the mana inside the fruits was getting increasingly dense. So the monster carcasses can speed up the nourishment of the purple mist fruits. Who would have thought that monsters would discover this unusual method? Alaric's eyes lit up with this discovery. It's about time. With quick, ghost-like movements, he rushed towards the purple mist tree. He moved so fast that none of the orcs managed to detect his presence. Alaric targeted the orc warriors at the bottom of the tree. With a series of quick stabs, 10 orc warriors were killed. The purple mist tree seemed to have sensed their death and quickly grabbed their corpses. Alaric ignored this eerie scene and went to kill the remaining orcs. In just the blink of an eye, half of the orc warriors had already been killed. Their corpses weren't even spared and served as nourishment for the purple mist tree. When only a fourth of the orc warriors were left, the orc general finally sensed that something was amiss. It looked down from the outpost and saw Alaric killing its subordinates with ease. "Enemy attack!" the orc general shouted, its voice attracting the attention of the remaining orc warriors. Hearing this, Alaric clicked his tongue. TSK. Since he had already been discovered, he no longer decided to be discreet with his attacks. He jumped directly towards the monster outpost and began his carnage. "It has been a while since I killed some orcs." His eyes turned red as he recalled the bad experiences he had with the orcs in his past life. Unknowingly, his ruthless slaughterer trait began to take effect. His physical strength was amplified, but negative thoughts also began to surface in his mind. "I didn't notice it in the battle in Ackland Pass, but these negative emotions are increasing my desire to kill. It's controllable, but I shouldn't be reckless." In less than half a minute, all the orc warriors had been killed, leaving the orc general as the sole survivor. "Human!" Backing off, the orc general revealed a trace of fear. Alaric didn't give it a chance to escape and swiftly cut off its head with a single slash. Whoosh! The orc general's headless corpse fell to the ground and was sucked dry by the roots of the purple mist tree. After killing all the orcs, the negative thoughts in his mind gradually vanished. Alaric lifted his head and looked at the dark purple fruit. "This one is still not mature, so I should cover it with leaves so others won't notice it." Alaric covered the fruit in thick leaves. "That should do it. Once the war is over, I will bring a researcher to inspect this fruit." Alaric observed the vicinity. After ascertaining that there was no one nearby, he left and rushed back to the main army. Meanwhile, the 10-man scout team had already traveled more than 90 miles. Along the way, they encountered 3 undiscovered monster outposts which they reported back to the main army. "We aren't even in the 100-mile mark, but we have already found 3 undiscovered monster outposts. It looks like His Highness Alaric's intuition was right," someone said in a grave tone. "Keep quiet. There are enemies ahead," Bane warned the group, his face looking incredibly serious. "Sir Bane, how many enemies can you see and how strong are they?" Varys asked while looking at the barbarian warrior. While keeping his eyes in front, Bane responded. "There are 60 goblin warriors, 10 hobgoblins, and they also have a disaster-grade goblin chieftain." Hearing this, Varys frowned. "Defeating them isn't a problem, but it wouldn't be good if the colony discovered us this early. We need to make a detour. It's too late. They have already discovered us." Chapter 405. Slaying the Goblins. Hearing his words, Varys didn't hesitate and quickly unsheathed his sword as he shouted, "Let's kill them quickly. Don't let them send a message back to the colony." The scout team grabbed their weapons and urged their horses to speed up. "Hiya!" Bane took the foremost position while grabbing the longsword strapped on his back. Meanwhile, Leslie and 2 more archers in the group released their arrows upon the goblins. Su! 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 All their arrows hit their targets, but only Leslie managed to kill a goblin warrior with a direct hit to the head. After releasing a few more arrows, 10 goblins fell, half of which were taken down by Leslie on her own. At this moment, the 2 sides collided. With a grunt, Bane waved his longsword, slicing through the bodies of the goblin warriors. With a single slash, he killed 3 goblins. The rest of the scout team didn't want to be outdone. They brandished their weapons, killing goblins left and right. In the blink of an eye, more than 30 goblin warriors fell, leaving only half of them alive. At this moment, Aldrin was closely following behind Bane, providing him with timely support when necessary. With them leading the group, another 10 goblins were killed. Leslie had also shot a hobgoblin to death. In no time, only the goblin chieftain, for hobgoblins, and a few goblin warriors remained. The rest had already been killed, their corpses scattered all over the place. You too. Follow me to deal with the goblin chieftain. The rest of you, kill the remaining enemies. Varys suddenly appeared out of nowhere, signaling to Bane and Aldrin to follow him. Seeing this, Aldrin and Bane quickly followed him. They squeezed their legs and urged their horses to move faster. With their mounts quick galloping, they soon arrived in front of the goblin chieftain. The monster seemed to be enraged. While roaring furiously, it wildly brandished its weapon, a giant club filled with spikes. Whoosh! Whoosh! Facing its relentless attacks, the 3 warriors maneuvered their horses to evade, skillfully displaying their horse-riding skills. When the monster was within his sword's range, Varys launched a blow to its neck with great precision. Whoosh! Hckk. His sword stabbed into its neck and pierced deeply, making the monster grimace in pain. However, it had high vitality, so it didn't die immediately. With a swipe of its muscular arm, it struck Varys heavily, making the elven warrior fall from his horse. Varys! Aldrin shouted in alarm. I'm fine. Kill it. Quick! Varys shouted as he lifted his body, grimacing. Seeing that he wasn't in critical condition, Bane and Aldrin flanked the goblin chieftain, attacking it simultaneously. With a sword stuck in its throat, the goblin chieftain's movements were awkward. It tried to defend itself against their attacks, but it was no longer in peak condition. In just a few breaths, it received multiple slashes and stabs, leaving deep wounds on its body. With one final struggle, it targeted Aldrin, in an attempt to take him down with it. However, Aldrin was quick on his feet. With nimble movements, he managed to evade the monster's spiked club. Now exhausted and close to death, the goblin chieftain's movement was getting slower. It was breathing heavily, its neck bleeding profusely. Out of nowhere, Bane appeared behind the goblin chieftain and sliced off its head with a slash. Whoosh! The goblin chieftain's body collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. How is everyone? Varys scanned his teammates. A few of them had minor wounds, but no one was severely wounded. This made him feel relieved. Everyone is fine. What about you? Bane approached him and scanned the elven warrior from head to foot. Varys waved his hand while shaking his head. I'm fine. Just a bruise on my chest, but it's nothing serious. Hearing this, Bane nodded his head. Approaching them on horseback, Leslie asked, The corpses will definitely attract attention. What should we do with them? Everyone moved their gazes to Varys. He was the leader of the team, so the decision was in his hands. Varys thought for a moment before he replied. Burning their bodies might cause a forest fire, so let's just dump them somewhere unnoticeable. Doing this was also risky, but it was better than having a forest fire. Upon hearing his words, everyone immediately gathered the corpses and carried them to a hidden place. After dealing with the corpses, the group resumed their journey. This time, they were more careful. To avoid another monster team, Varys told the group to be more vigilant. With everyone maintaining a state of high vigilance, they managed to bypass a few monster teams without being caught. A few hours later, they were about to reach the halfway mark. However, the group discovered some crude traps that slowed them down. Be careful. There are traps everywhere. Varys alerted the team. Leslie, send a message to the main army and inform them about the traps. He instructed. I got it. Leslie nodded and immediately summoned a messenger bird with a nearly inaudible whistling sound. While they were dismantling the traps, Bane, who was observing the vicinity, suddenly sensed the presence of an incoming monster team. Enemies are coming. Hide, all of you, he shouted. Luckily for them, the bushes in the forest were tall enough to hide them and their horses. The grass could also mask the sound of their footsteps. A moment later, 10 monsters came into their view. Ogres. Everyone was alarmed when they saw the towering figures of the beasts. Moreover, these ogres were disaster-grade beasts. While keeping an eye on the approaching ogres, Aldrin rubbed his horse's back to calm it down. "Relax. I'm here," he whispered. The others were also comforting their restless horses. Meanwhile, Varys was analyzing the situation. Both groups are equal in strength and numbers, so there might be casualties if we fight them. We can only hope that they still haven't discovered us so we can ambush them. Thinking about this, he sent a series of hand signals to the team. Chapter 406. Varys is unsatisfied with the results. Unlike other disaster-grade monsters, ogres were innately bloodthirsty and cruel. They devour their prey, skin and bones, to increase their strength. With their towering bodies and muscular physiques, even a skilled elite knight would have to run upon seeing them. Not to mention that there were 10 such merciless beasts approaching them. As the ogres walked towards them, everyone in the scout team tightened their grip on their weapons, ready to attack at any moment. At this moment, Varys sent a hand signal to Leslie. Seeing his signal, Leslie imbued mana into her arrows while aiming at one of the ogres. When her arrow was close to absorbing the maximum amount of mana it could absorb, she suddenly released it with fearsome power and precision. Sue traveled so fast that it tore through the air. Her arrow violently struck an ogre's head, causing it to burst like a smashed watermelon. CHK. The monster's corpse fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Startled, some ogres took cover behind the trees, while the others rushed towards where the arrow had been released. Leslie was playing a big role this time, acting as the bait, but she also faced significant danger. In the face of the approaching beasts, she felt a wave of fear, but she tried to put on a calm facade. She didn't want her teammates to think that she was afraid. Her pride as the daughter of a high elf didn't allow her to let anyone witness such embarrassing behavior. Everyone nervously waited for Varys's signal. For this ambush to work, they must be perfectly synchronized in their attacks. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to deal much damage to the ogres. Varys felt a great deal of pressure, but his mind was unnaturally calm. Just when the ogres were about to surround Leslie, he opened his mouth and shouted, "Attack!" Hearing his words, everyone quickly took action. They flanked the ogres from left to right, attacking them from both sides. The unexpected appearance of more human warriors caught the ogres by surprise. They were unable to react in time, with some of them receiving critical wounds. However, only 3 ogres were successfully taken down. The remaining 6 managed to counterattack and pushed back the scouting team with pure aggression. Spread out and attack them in different directions. Leslie, take another shot. Varys issued a series of commands. With his quick and timely instructions, the team was able to coordinate their attacks. While the rest of the team was pulling the ogre's attention, Leslie quietly aimed her bow towards her next target. She gathered the mana in her body and imbued it into her arrow. Only an arrow powered by mana could penetrate the body of a disaster-grade monster. Leslie's face turned pale as she released her arrow. Sue. In the next moment, another ogre was killed with a huge gaping hole in its chest. The death of another ogre made its remaining brethren enraged. They roared furiously while swinging their weapons with ferocious force. Bang! Bang! One member of the scouting team was struck by a giant sledgehammer. His helmet was deformed and his head cracked open from the impact. The poor fellow fell from his horse, his fate unknown. Everyone saw this, but they couldn't afford to be distracted. Let them exhaust themselves. Try to preserve your mana. Varys reminded the team, his face grim. One slight mistake and one of them might be killed. The ogres were like frenzied beasts. Despite the injuries that had accumulated in their bodies, their movements didn't seem to have slowed down. Instead, they had become more aggressive. Buy me some time. I can release one more of those mana-imbued arrows. Leslie shouted while popping a recovery elixir into her mouth. Bane, Aldrin, follow me. We will kill one. The rest of you, try to hold down the remaining 4. Varys's words drifted into their ears. They were stunned by his commands, but they still moved accordingly. We must kill another one as quickly as possible. Varys thought as he urged his horse to charge towards one of the ogres. Bane and Aldrin closely followed him, flanking him from either side. I will take the front. Attack it from both sides, Varys instructed while keeping his eyes on their target. As soon as his words fell, he maneuvered his horse to leap forward while brandishing his sword. Meanwhile, Bane and Aldrin attacked the ogre from different directions. The ogre's focus was entirely on Varys, so it failed to detect the other two. It blocked Varys' attack, but Bane and Aldrin managed to leave deep wounds upon its body. The beast staggered at the critical blows, and Varys took this chance to deliver a slash towards its neck. Whoosh! His sword left a trail of blood as it cut off the beast's head. After killing the monster, Varys pulled the reins, forcing his horse to turn in another direction. He then pointed his sword at another target and shouted, "The battle is not over. Let's go and help the others." Hiya! The 5 guys who were holding down the 4 ogres were already in a desperate situation. One of the warriors even had an arm cut off, while the rest also had varying degrees of injuries. "It's ready. Move out of the way." Leslie's voice fell into their ears. Sue. Her arrow shot towards an ogre, but this time, the monster managed to twist its body to avoid a critical hit. However, the arrow still pierced through its leg, leaving a bloody hole that significantly impeded its movements. I missed. Leslie's face fell upon missing her intended target. She aimed for the ogre's chest, but the monster was quick enough to evade the fatal blow. I will deal with it. You guys kill the remaining 3. Without waiting for their response, Bane rushed towards the injured ogre. It's already severely injured. I can handle this much. With a snort, he brandished his weapon with pinpoint accuracy. His sword was so fast that each of his slashes left afterimages in the air. Whoosh! Whoosh! SHCKK. SHHK. The crippled ogre couldn't properly defend itself. Against Bane's fearsome attacks, it slowly succumbed to its injuries and fell to the ground, bleeding profusely. Looking at the fallen monster, Bane unhesitatingly stabbed its neck and twisted his sword. SHHK. The remaining ogres were soon dealt with under the relentless attack of the team. The monsters fell one by one, their towering bodies collapsing to the ground. We did it, but Varys was unhappy with the results. One of them was killed and another one had his arm cut off. To some, it might be a great victory, but he couldn't accept such results. It's my fault. There could have been another way to prevent casualties. He gritted his teeth while looking at their fallen comrade's body. It's not your fault. He felt a hand pressing on his shoulder, making him feel a bit surprised. He turned his head and saw Bane giving him a comforting glance. No. Varys didn't agree with him. I am the leader of this team. Everyone's life is my responsibility and his death is my fault. Bane sighed while shaking his head. This guy was more stubborn than he had thought. He jumped off his horse and covered the dead warrior's body with leaves and grass. This man joined this battle knowing that death may come for him. For us barbarians, dying in battle is a glorious moment. You don't need to feel pity for him. He died a warrior's way. Hearing Bane's words, everyone felt a wave of emotion. Aldrin put his hands together and prayed for the warrior's soul. The rest of the team also offered their solemn prayers. After a few minutes, Bane jumped onto his horse and said, "Let's go. Our task is not done. We can't stay here forever." He then moved his gaze towards the warrior who had his arm cut off and asked, "Are you coming with us?" The man hesitated for a moment before he replied with a nod. "I will not slow you down." "Good." Bane nodded. He then looked at Varys, as if waiting for him to say something. Sensing his gaze, Varys took a deep breath and said, "I will give you 2 minutes to dress your wounds and mask the smell of blood." Everyone quickly bandaged their wounds. To mask the scent of blood on their bodies, they smeared their skin with ground grass and herb paste. When they were about to leave, Leslie looked at Bane and asked, "What about his body? Are we leaving him here?" Bane stared deeply at her and replied, "His body will become nourishment to the plants. Even if he is eaten by beasts, it doesn't matter. Leslie didn't like it, but seeing that the barbarian warriors didn't seem to mind the arrangement, she no longer said anything. If there's nothing else, let's move out, Varys commanded. Chapter 407, Varys's Risky Plan. The scout team resumed its journey towards the monster colony. They hadn't even arrived at their destination, but they had already lost one of their teammates, so morale was low. The mood was grim, and no one was even in the mood for casual conversations. The next day, the team finally arrived at the monster colony. It was located in what seemed to be a deep mining cave with numerous, complex entrances. They could see a large group of monsters stationed at the mouth of this complex cave. There were goblin warriors, orc warriors, and ogres. Surprisingly, they also discovered other types of monsters like kobolds, reptilian bipedal monsters with dragon-like heads. Are kobolds included in the previous reports? Aldrin glanced at Varys with an inquisitive look. The elven warrior shook his head, his face looking incredibly serious. No. The kobolds might have recently surrendered to the colony. Look over there. He pointed at a group of kobolds. Everyone turned their heads and saw a group of kobolds doing hard labor. Some of them were chained, and they were even being whipped by other monsters. From the looks of it, the kobolds should have the lowest status in the colony. This was only Varys's guess based on what he was seeing, but everyone agreed with his assessment. Aldrin was impressed by his quick judgment. They hadn't even been here for long, but he had already discovered many important details that others would have overlooked. Other than his ability to command, he is also very observant. Now I understand why His Highness chose this man as our team leader. Aldrin was once again impressed by Alaric's discerning eyes. In just a short time, he was able to choose the perfect person to lead the scouting team. What should we do next? Bane asked while keeping his eyes on the monsters. There might be more things we don't know about the colony, but we need to go inside to gather more information. Varys responded with a heavy expression. Hearing this, everyone's face darkened. Entering this complex cave system would be difficult with so many monsters guarding the entrances. Moreover, they don't have a map to guide them around the complicated tunnels. After a moment of silence, Varys gestured for everyone to come closer as he whispered, "The rest of you should return and inform the main army about what we have seen here. The kobolds, the complex cave system, the maze-like tunnels. Everything we saw here must be reported to the main army." "What about you?" Leslie asked with a frown. Varys took a deep breath and replied with a determined look, "I will go inside and have a look." Everyone was stunned by his words. This was no different than blindly entering the lion's den. "Are you crazy? How are you going to get in there with all those monsters around? It's too dangerous. I don't agree with this plan." Leslie shook her head. "She is right, Varys. It is too dangerous for you to go alone. It would be better if I followed you inside. That way we can help each other out in case something happens." Bane voiced his opinion with a grim smile. Leslie was exasperated. She thought that Bane was also against the plan, but he actually wanted to follow Varys inside the monster colony. "You must be insane." Leslie scowled while shaking her head. "If you two are going, then count me in as well." Aldrin expressed his desire to follow. He felt that they hadn't gathered enough information, so he wanted to go inside the colony to obtain more intel to help the main army and his lord. "Are you guys tired of living?" Leslie face-bombed at their recklessness. Varys nodded resolutely. "Then it's decided. The three of us will head inside the colony, while the rest of you will return to the main army to report what we have seen." Another guy wanted to join them, but Varys rejected him. "Moving with 4 people will be a lot more difficult. The 3 of us should be enough. That way we can move around without alerting those monsters." "And how do you plan on doing that? Can't you see those monsters there? You 3 will be discovered immediately once you step in there." Leslie was still against the plan. She didn't want them to go through such a risk. "About that, I already have a plan. Please trust me, Leslie." Varys stared deeply at her, his eyes filled with confidence. Leslie sighed. "Fine, but you must retreat immediately once things go south." "We will be careful." Varys nodded. The group separated after exchanging solemn goodbyes. After Leslie left with the other members, only Varys, Bane, and Aldrin were left behind. "How are we going to do this?" Aldrin inquired. Bane also glanced at Varys, waiting for his response. "Do you see those monsters wearing armor?" Varys pointed at another group of monsters. The two followed his gaze and saw a group of humanoid monsters dressed like human warriors. "Those people must be half-barbarians. We will kill 3 of them, steal their equipment, and go in using their identities." While mentioning this, he observed Bane's expression. Their target was a group of half-barbarians, so he wanted to know if he was uncomfortable with the idea. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Bane could tell what was on his mind. "You don't need to worry about my feelings. They might possess our bloodline, but since they stand with the monsters, they are our enemies." Bane muttered coldly. Hearing this, Varys was relieved. "Good. Then let's go and lure those guys out." Aldrin and Bane nodded solemnly. A moment later, the trio crept closer to the colony. They moved carefully to avoid being detected by the monsters. Varys suddenly threw something to attract the attention of their targets. "What's that?" The half-barbarians heard the noise, and a small group volunteered to check the situation. Seeing this, Varys gestured at the other 2 to keep quiet and wait for his signal. Chapter 408. Storage Cavern. 5 half-barbarians warily approached the direction of the sound. But when they arrived, there was nothing unusual. "False alarm. It's probably just a stray animal or something." One of them chuckled while shaking his head. The group was about to return when 3 figures suddenly emerged behind them. In the blink of an eye, all 5 of them were killed. They didn't even know how they died. "Get their equipment. Make sure that your faces are covered." Those were the last words they heard before they closed their eyes for eternity. After putting on the armor of the half-barbarians, the trio headed straight to the colony. "Just walk calmly and don't do anything that would make them suspicious. If someone comes to question us, let me do the talking," Varys said as he led them towards the complex cave entrances. Just as they were about to head inside one of the entrances, a deep voice echoed behind them. "Hold on." Aldrin and Bane subconsciously grabbed the handles of their weapons, but Varys quickly motioned for them to keep calm. Varys turned around and looked at the one who had spoken. It was another half-barbarian with orc features. "I don't recognize you 3. Who is your chieftain?" "Brother, we know the rules. Just pretend you didn't see us this time. Please do us this favor. We will cover your shift tomorrow." Varys answered without stuttering. The half-barbarian narrowed his eyes. "What's your name?" "I'm Bane." "What is your name, brother?" Varys gave the first name that came to his mind. /N/OV.E/L.com. The half-barbarian didn't respond for some time, but his expression gradually loosened and bloomed into a relaxed smile. "All right, I will remember your words, Bane. I'm called Rugal. You better not go back on your words or I'll come looking for you." "Haha. Rest assured, Rugal. I will find you tomorrow." Looking at Varys freely conversing with an enemy made Aldrin and Bane genuinely impressed. This guy was slick with his words. A moment later, the half-barbarian finally let them leave. "That was close." Varys let out a nervous chuckle. "You did well," Aldrin praised while smiling beneath his mask. Bane also gave him a thumbs up. Varys shook his head. "Enough with the idle chatter. It's time to go." The trio entered one of the cave entrances. The path was a narrow tunnel illuminated by crudely made torches. They encountered some monsters along the way, but they acted calmly and just walked straight without speaking. When there was no one nearby, Bane whispered, "This tunnel is like a maze. I have already forgotten which way we came from." "It's fine. The route is inside my head," responded Varys while pointing his head. Hearing this, Bane no longer said anything. As they headed deeper, the tunnel became even more crowded with more monsters passing by. To avoid attracting attention, the trio chose to follow a large crowd that they heard was heading towards a place they called the storage. From the bits and pieces of information they heard, Varys guessed that this place was probably where the colony stored its food reserves. I think we are on to something really important. He thought to himself, anticipation and a trace of nervousness brewing in his heart. After a quarter of an hour, they emerged to a spacious cavern filled with all sorts of preserved food and resources like drinkable water. There were monster workers inside the cavern, monitoring the resources with unblinking eyes. There were also monster warriors eyeing everyone that entered with stern gazes. Varys, we should leave now. Discovering this storage cavern should be enough to help the main army. Bane whispered. There were more monster warriors around, so the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous for them. One wrong move and their cover would be blown. Aldrin didn't say anything, but he agreed with Bane's words. They could use the knowledge about this cavern to sabotage the food supply of the monster colony. Doing this would definitely cause chaos and make the monsters panic. Varys didn't respond right away. He discreetly observed the cavern and the monster warriors. We will burn this place, he suddenly said, his words shocking his two companions. What? Bane stared at him in disbelief. That is too dangerous. The exit might be blocked if we cause a commotion here. That would leave us no room to escape. Aldrin chimed in, expressing his opposition to the plan. I know, but trust me on this. I have a plan. Varys didn't want to give up. Aldrin and Bane hesitated for a moment, but they eventually relented under his persuasion. Fine, let's do it. Dying like this wouldn't be too bad. At least we can do something big to guarantee our victory in the war. Bane forced a smile. Do I still have a choice? Aldrin shook his head with a defeated expression. Varys grinned. Don't worry. No matter what happens, I won't let you two die. Meanwhile, Leslie's team of 6 was on their way to regroup with the main army when one of them discovered that they were being followed. Someone's on us, Sandro shouted. Author's note. See Chapter 403 for reference. Sandro is a barbarian warrior from the Green-Eyed Falcon tribe. His words made everyone alarmed. What? Leslie's face fell. She didn't sense anyone's presence, but when she focused on her auditory senses, she finally heard the distant galloping of horses. Enemies are behind us, she shouted. What should we do, Dame Leslie? Someone asked, looking incredibly pale-faced. Everyone turned their heads to her. Leslie furrowed her eyebrows and replied, Our horses have been running for hours. Those guys will catch up soon. We need to slow them down. With a resolute gaze, she said, I will lure them away. You guys should move separately to increase your chances of escaping. Once you find the main army, report everything we discovered without missing a detail. Everyone was stunned. No, Dame Leslie. Leave this task to me. Chapter 409. Emmer's Last Smile. Leslie turned her head. The one who had spoken was the barbarian warrior who had lost an arm during the battle against ogres. No. With your condition, you will only lose your life. Leslie shook her head and was about to reject him when, We don't have time to hesitate, the one-armed barbarian warrior exclaimed emotionally. Don't underestimate the strength of a barbarian warrior. I may have lost an arm, but I am still one of the strongest elite knights in our tribe. Please leave this to me and deliver the message to the main army. Looking at his determined gaze, Leslie hesitated. She couldn't bring herself to leave someone behind, but if nothing were to be done, the whole team would be killed. Novel bin. While she was hesitating, an arrow was suddenly shot towards her. Whoosh! It was already too late when she noticed and didn't have the time to evade. Just when the arrow was about to hit her, an axe appeared out of nowhere to block it. Clang! Leslie was stunned. It was the one-armed barbarian warrior. You! There's no time to waste. Leave now, all of you, the barbarian warrior roared. The members of the scouting team looked at Leslie. She had the highest authority now that Varys wasn't present. Leslie gritted her teeth and opened her mouth. Let's move out separately. Go! Hearing her words, everyone nodded and turned their horses in different directions. Leslie didn't leave right away. She looked at the one-armed barbarian warrior and asked, What's your name? Emergency. The one-armed barbarian revealed a grim smile. Leslie stared deeply at him and said, Emmer, is it? You better not die. We will wait for you. After saying those words, she kicked her horse's belly, forcing it to run faster. Emmer watched her figure disappear into the woods. That is a difficult order, Dame Leslie. At this moment, a few arrows flew past him. Sue! 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 He narrowly avoided the arrows, but his horse wasn't so lucky. Some of them struck the poor creature, making it cry out in pain. Shit! His horse didn't die from the arrows, but they slowed down its movements. He looked back and saw dozens of monsters approaching him, their faces filled with intense excitement and bloodlust. Fear enveloped his heart, but he quickly calmed himself. I need to buy them as much time as possible. He took a deep breath and pulled the reins, forcing his horse to turn around. With a grim expression, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Today I, Emmer, will die a glorious death. I will take 20 of you down with me. His roar momentarily stunned the monsters. In the next moment, Emmer, alone, charged towards the approaching monster warriors. Whoosh! Whoosh! CHK. With a single swipe of his axe, 3 goblin warriors fell. Whoosh! An arrow struck his chest, penetrating deeply into his body, but he showed no sign of pain. He didn't even flinch. He just ferociously swung his axe, killing multiple monsters with every strike. CHK. CHK. The cries of the beasts echoed in the forest as they fell under his axe. In the blink of an eye, 12 monsters had died. Meanwhile, Emerson had 6 arrows stuck on various parts of his body. He also received numerous cuts, and even his horse could barely stand. He was breathing heavily as he looked at the monsters around him. He had been surrounded with no gaps for him to escape. This is it. This is where I die. But I'm still short of 8 monsters. With his face covered in blood, he smiled faintly. Come at me. The monsters were provoked. They showed fierce expressions as they rushed towards him simultaneously. Their beastly roars shook the forest. Emmer imbued his remaining mana into his arm, making his muscles bulge and his veins protrude. With a snort, he wildly brandished his axe. Whoosh! Whoosh! 3 monsters were decapitated, but Emmer's body was also pierced with all sorts of weapons. His vision was darkening. He could feel his strength leaving his body, but he refused to let go of his axe. You need more than that to make me fall, he muttered, glaring at the monsters with disdain. He twisted his body, forcing himself to swing his axe for the last time. Whoosh! 4 monsters collapsed to the ground, their bodies twitching as blood leaked out of their bodies. Novel bin. Shit. I only killed 7. He tried to lift his arm, but an orc warrior had clung onto him, preventing him from moving. Like a deranged beast, Emmer opened his mouth and took a huge chunk off the orc's neck with one bite. Roar! The monsters continuously stabbed his body, while he took another bite of the orc warrior's neck. This time, he managed to bite off an artery, which made the orc warrior's neck bleed profusely. Satisfied, he let out a delighted smile before he breathed his last breath. Although he had already died, the monsters chopped his body and devoured his flesh to vent their fury. It was a gruesome end, but Emmer didn't regret his sacrifice. Meanwhile, inside the monster colony, Varys somehow managed to start a fire using the resources he found in the cavern. Quick! Let's leave while they still haven't noticed anything, he whispered to Aldrin and Bane. The 2 nodded with grim faces. Without hesitation, the trio left the cavern using the route they had taken. By the time they left, the fire they started had already turned into a big flame that engulfed the resources inside the storage cavern. The monsters panicked and they began to scramble in all directions, which caused a stampede. The trio heard the commotion echoing through the tunnel. You 2 follow me. Let's run. Varys rushed forward without waiting for their response. Seeing this, Bane and Aldrin quickly followed him, anxiety gripping their hearts. As they navigated the narrow tunnel, the screams behind them intensified. At this moment, a series of explosions suddenly erupted. Boom! Boom! Chapter 410. Explosion in the Monster Nest. They could already feel the heat coming from the cavern. "We are almost out," Aldrin shouted while pointing at the light coming from the entrance of the cave. "Hurry! Jump!" Bane urged. He could already see the incoming fire approaching them. In the next moment, the trio jumped out of the tunnel and boom! 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 Various cave entrances exploded, spewing flames and black smoke. "We're alive. We actually did it," Aldrin mumbled to himself as he watched the monsters screaming as they rushed out of the tunnels.
"No.
"There's trouble coming. It seems like we have been discovered." Varys's voice suddenly drifted into their ears. Turning their heads, they saw a group of orc warriors approaching them with menacing faces. "Halt! You three! Come here and take off your helmets," one of the orc warriors shouted in an unfriendly voice. "Varys!" Aldrin nervously looked around. More monsters were approaching them, and they seemed to be suspicious of them. Bane grabbed the handle of his sword, but before he could unsheath it, Varys whispered, "When I say run, follow me immediately." Hearing this, Bane and Aldrin nodded, sweat trickling down their faces. "Are you three deaf? Move your feet unless you want me to cut them off for you." The orc warrior was starting to get annoyed. A few of its subordinates had even unsheathed their weapons as they approached. All of a sudden, Varys unsheathed his sword and shouted, "Follow me!" He rushed in the direction where there were fewer monsters. Bane and Aldrin quickly followed. "They are trying to escape. They must be the culprits. Catch them. Kill those three. They must be spies." The trio killed all the monsters that blocked their path. "Don't stop. Our horses should still be there," Varys shouted while brandishing his sword. Whoosh! Whoosh! More monsters rushed over when they noticed the commotion, increasing the pressure on the trio. Clang! Clang! "We're almost there," Varys exclaimed after stabbing an orc warrior. The three carved out a path of blood and somehow found the horses they left in the middle of the forest. They jumped onto their horses and reflexively squeezed their legs, urging the creatures to run away. "Hiya!" Aldrin looked back and saw hundreds of monsters chasing them, their faces filled with madness and rage. "They have horses," he told the other two. Varys turned his head and frowned. "How about we escape in different directions to divide them? One of us might be able to escape," Bane suggested in a grave tone. Varys shook his head at his words.
"No.
"They won't be able to outrun us unless they have disaster-grade mounts." "Sue!
Su! Su!"
Arrows suddenly flew towards them, but the three blocked them effortlessly with a wave of their weapons. "These arrows are slowing us down." Varys's face fell. While he was thinking of a countermeasure, a thought flashed in his mind. "That's right. This is the only way." He pulled the reins of his horse, forcing it to take an abrupt turn. "Don't stop running. I will catch up soon," he shouted. Startled, Bane and Aldrin looked at him with disbelief. "What are you doing, you fool?" "Varys, what are you trying to do?" Varys grinned at them. "I promised that I won't let you two die. This is the only way to fulfill that promise." "Damn! Stop acting like a damn hero and get your ass over here," Aldrin shouted, but Varys just sent him a smile. "It's a pleasure meeting you two. Let's meet again in the next life." After saying those words, Varys faced the monsters and squeezed his legs, urging his horse to charge towards the enemies. "Varys!" Aldrin and Bane could only watch as Varys rushed towards the monsters by himself. Enveloped by grief and intense emotion, Aldrin roared indignantly, tears streaming down his face. He could hear the sounds of swords clashing behind him. He could hear the monsters screaming and Varys's unbridled laughter. Aldrin gripped the reins tightly and hesitated. "Don't even think about joining him, Aldrin. I won't be able to sleep if you two will join him in death." Bane's voice snapped him back into reality. Aldrin gritted his teeth and looked back. He could no longer see Varys's figure. "That bastard! How dare he pull this stunt on us?" he muttered, his voice trembling. "This is his choice. We must survive so his sacrifice won't be in vain." Bane sighed emotionally. Aldrin clenched his fists, his eyes bloodshot. I will be back, Varys. I promise to avenge you. The main army had temporarily set up camp 50 miles away from the monster colony. They had been marching for an entire day, so Lucas decided to let the soldiers rest to give everyone plenty of energy before the battle. At this moment, Alaric was sitting outside his tent, cleaning his swords with a cloth. He suddenly felt a disturbance from afar. With a frown, he abruptly rose to his feet and looked in the direction of the monster colony. He could feel the air vibrating intensely as if something had disturbed the natural airflow. He sheathed his swords and rushed to his father's tent only to see him standing there with a grim expression. "Dad, can you see it? What's going on over there?" Alaric asked. "There was an explosion in the monster colony. A big one at that," Lucas responded. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. Just what happened there? He had a feeling that this had something to do with the scouting team he sent, but he didn't have evidence, so he didn't mention it to his father. There are only 10 of them. Couldn't be them, right? He felt inexplicably nervous. Looking at his unusual expression, Lucas probed. "Is this related to the scout team you sent?" Alaric was taken aback. He shook his head with uncertainty. "I'm not sure either. I only told them to gather information." Lucas sighed and nodded. "We should receive word from them soon. If they are still alive, that is." Chapter 4:11. 5 survivors. Half a day after the main army heard the explosion, a warrior came to give Alaric an urgent report. "Your Highness, there is news from the 10-man scouting team." Hearing this, Alaric was pleasantly surprised. He gestured at the warrior to keep talking. "Go on."
I'm listening.
"A total of 3 people have returned from the team and all of them are injured. As for the others, there is a high chance that all of them are already dead." Alaric's expression darkened. "What? Where are the survivors?" He didn't care about the other members, but he also sent Aldrin with them. "They are being treated by our healers at the moment. Would you like me to bring you there?" Alaric took a deep breath and nodded. "Bring me to see them." "Yes, Your Highness." Alaric followed the warrior to where the auxiliary unit was located. The healers of the army are in this unit, and they were tactically placed somewhere in the rear of the formation. When he arrived at the unit's position, he was taken to a tent where the survivors of the 10-man scouting team were being treated. As soon as he entered the tent, he saw a group of medical personnel bandaging the wounds of 3 people. One was an elven woman and the other 2 were barbarian warriors. "Aldrin isn't here. 7 of them are missing, including Varys. Just what happened out there?" Alaric's heart sank at the bottom of the abyss. He approached the only conscious person of the 3 and crouched in front of her.
Dame Leslie.
Upon hearing his voice, Leslie opened her eyes with great difficulty. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises. There were also arrows stuck on her shoulders and legs. She had the worst condition of the 3, but she managed to remain conscious, probably because of her innately superior constitution as an elf. "Why, Your Highness?" Her voice was barely audible, and it looked like it took her a great deal of effort to utter those words. "Dame Leslie, where are the others? What happened to the rest of you?" Alaric asked with a frown. Leslie suddenly cried as she replied. "Everyone. They are probably dead." "Dead?" Alaric was stunned. "What happened? Can you tell me everything you know?" Although she was struggling to move, Leslie weakly nodded her head. She then recounted everything they had discovered. When she mentioned that there were more types of monsters in the colony, Alaric's face turned grim. Kobolds, half-barbarians, and other humanoid creatures. While he was ruminating on her words, Leslie continued. "Varys wanted to go inside the colony to gather more information. We didn't agree with his decision, but he insisted on entering the monster nest. Sir Bane and Sir Aldrin went with him. The entrances to the monster nest looked complicated, so I don't know what happened. That is all I know since we parted ways afterwards." After hearing what happened, Alaric fell into deep thought. Based on her words, there was a high chance that the 3 caused the explosion in the monster nest. However, until they gathered more evidence, this would only remain a speculation. "Thank you." Alaric thanked her and told the medical practitioners to make sure that everyone would be treated well. He then stepped out of the tent and was about to inform Lucas about what happened when he saw two warriors on horseback coming towards him. Seeing their faces, Alaric was relieved. "Aldrin, he's alive." He felt as if a heavy boulder had been lifted off his chest. The two got down from their horses and greeted him. "Your Highness." They had various wounds all over their bodies, but they were surprisingly in better shape compared to Leslie. "It's good that you two are alive." Alaric gestured for them to sit down. "Where is Varys?" he asked tentatively. The faces of the two warriors changed all of a sudden. "Varys is dead," Aldrin muttered while clenching his fist. Hearing his confirmation, Alaric sighed. He could see the deep trauma on their faces. It would be a lie to say that he didn't feel guilty, but he hardened his heart. He knew that sacrifices were necessary to prevent more casualties. "It must have been hard on you all." Aldrin looked like he wanted to say something, but Bane suddenly stepped forward and said, "Your Highness, I will tell you everything that happened." He recounted what they had discovered in the monster nest. The types of monsters present, the layout of the complex cave structures, the approximate number of monsters, and everything else. He didn't miss a single detail. He also informed Alaric about what they had done in the storage cavern. "Your Highness, Varys didn't." Bane wanted to tell him that it wasn't Varys's fault, but Alaric raised his hand and stopped him from saying anything. "Your task was only to gather information, but you have contributed more than what you were supposed to do. I don't blame you guys." Alaric smiled helplessly. He didn't expect Varys to be so courageous as to do something so reckless. He was truly a rare talent. Such a pity that he was killed. He lamented the death of such a capable warrior. "You two should go and get yourselves treated. Leave the rest to us. You may return to the Elven Kingdom once you have been treated." Alaric didn't want them to join the battle in their present condition. Besides, they had already accomplished far more than what they were supposed to do. Just as he was about to leave, Aldrin's voice fell into his ears. "Your Highness, please allow me to join you in battle." Taken aback, Alaric glanced at him. He saw the determination, guilt, anger, and other complex emotions in his eyes. Alaric saw his own image on Aldrin. He looked just like him in his past life. Seeing your comrades die before you would make you live with guilt and regret. With a heavy sigh, Alaric nodded. "All right, but you must get treated first." "Yes, Your Highness." Aldrin lowered his head gratefully. "I will also join the battle, Your Highness." Bane opened his mouth. He had the same fierce determination in his eyes. "All right, you two can come and find me once you are done with your treatment." Chapter 412, War with the Colony begins. With the information provided by the scouting team, Lucas convened the military officers. "Everyone, we received new information from our scouts about the colony." Lucas didn't beat around the bush and told everyone the reason for the meeting. According to the collected data, there are more than 200,000 monsters in the colony, including new types of monsters like kobolds, half-barbarians. When he mentioned that there were half-barbarians, some of the barbarian warriors felt slightly uncomfortable. Although those half-barbarians had monster bloodlines, they still carried the bloodline of barbarians. Lucas continued, "The explosion yesterday was caused by our men, and with their efforts, the colony's storage cavern has been destroyed. Without food reserves, their army would be on edge, and they would have a hard time surviving an invasion as long as we prevent them from stepping out of the nest." Hearing this, everyone was surprised. They couldn't believe that a 10-man unit composed of elite knights could accomplish such a feat. Now that the colony is in chaos, this is the best time to strike them. Lucas's words garnered everyone's approval. With the colony in turmoil, they wouldn't be able to react properly against an attack. Lucas and the military officers discussed the changes to their plans. After half an hour, he sent everyone off to deliver the message to their respective units. The army resumed its march towards the monster colony, but this time, everyone was positive about the coming battle. This gave rise to an increase in their morale. Soon, the monster nest came into their view. Just like what had been reported, It was an underground cave system. The monsters had set up several layers of defensive lines in anticipation of their arrival. Looking at the earthen walls and the large numbers of monsters waiting for them, Lucas raised his sword and shouted, "Charge!" Following his command, the army of 200,000 warriors charged towards the defensive walls. The sounds of the war horns, the roars of the warriors and monsters, and the violent clashing of blades echoed. On the first day of the battle, the monster army managed to defend the outer walls, but they lost tens of thousands of monsters. On the other hand, the alliance of the barbarian tribes and the Elven Kingdom only lost a few thousand warriors. Considering the results, it was a victory for them, but Lucas was unsatisfied with the outcome. The monsters were surprisingly resilient, and they also moved as if someone was manipulating them from the shadows. It didn't feel like they were fighting an army of brainless monsters, but a properly trained army with a brilliant tactician. Later that evening, Lucas gathered the representatives from each unit to discuss the situation. "Can someone tell me what is happening? How are those monsters fighting with that kind of energy when they had lost their food reserves?" Garandel asked with a frown. He couldn't comprehend what was going on. The representatives were similarly baffled. They thought that they would be fighting an army of hungry and exhausted monsters, but that didn't happen. The monsters were ferocious, and they had even managed to construct fortifications before their arrival. "What do you think, Lucas?" Vulcan turned his head to Lucas. Author's note: Vulcan is a barbarian warrior and is Lucas's longtime friend. He is also the right-hand man of the barbarian king. Lucas frowned as he replied in a grim tone. An ordinary monster wouldn't be capable of such detailed military tactics. Only someone with deep knowledge can do this. He paused for a moment before he continued. "We once fought a powerful monster back then. It was a creature that was about to become a catastrophe-grade beast. Its intelligence far surpassed that of ordinary monsters." Everyone's faces became serious upon hearing this. They had heard stories about catastrophe-grade beasts. They were terrifying creatures that could destroy a small empire. Even a mythical knight would have a hard time against them. "Can you fight a monster at that level?" Vulcan asked while staring deeply at him. Lucas took a deep breath and responded with uncertainty. "I am not sure. Catastrophe-grade beasts also have different levels. I can probably fight against an ordinary one, but if it's something as powerful as Zephyr..." He didn't say anything and just shook his head. But everyone understood his message. "That's right. We have a draconic lion on our side," exclaimed Garandel. Everyone's faces eased upon hearing this. They also had a catastrophe-grade beast on their side, a powerful one at that. "That is true. But what if there isn't just one catastrophe-grade beast in the nest?" Someone from the crowd suddenly spoke. Everyone turned their heads and saw that it was Alaric. "What do you mean?" Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. Alaric was also uncertain. His only clue was the level of difficulty in his mission. A single catastrophe-grade beast wasn't enough to turn the difficulty into hell mode, so he guessed that there was more. "I'm only saying what could be the worst that could happen." Alaric shook his head. "We must move while thinking that there could be more of them, so we can be prepared for the situation," he added. Lucas narrowed his eyes. Whenever Alaric said something like this, it would always come true. "Your son is right, Lucas. We should be prepared for any situation. Our warriors would be in disarray if an unexpected variable appeared. Giving them a warning should be enough so they would be prepared for this kind of situation." Vulcan expressed his agreement to Alaric's words. Crossing his arms, Lucas nodded. "Then what do you think we should do?" Everyone looked at Alaric, waiting for his response. Sensing their gazes, Alaric adjusted his posture and responded, "We will draw out those monsters." During our first attack, Venerable Lucas joined the battle to give momentum to our warriors, but no catastrophe-grade beast revealed itself. This means that they are being cautious. We need to force them to come out, and this is how we should do it. Chapter 413, Two-Headed Ogre Warrior. The next day, before the sun had risen, Vulcan led the army to launch another attack on the outer defensive walls of the monster nest. He brought a total of 50,000 warriors. Half of them were cavalrymen, while the other half was a mix of infantrymen and ranged units. Vulcan's role was to gather the attention of the monsters. Once the focus was on his army, Garandel would lead another group to attack the other side of the outer walls. This was the plan they had discussed yesterday, a two-pronged attack to divide the enemy's forces. At this moment, Alaric was in their camp watching the battle half a mile from his location. With his powerful perception, he could see the situation clearly even without imbuing mana into his eyes. Do you think the catastrophe-grade beasts will reveal themselves with this plan? A voice drifted into his ears. Even without turning his head, he knew that it was Lucas. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows as he replied, "This strategy will only divide the monsters into two defensive positions." He crossed his arms and continued, "With their defense concentrated on these two locations, there is bound to be a gap in other areas. That's when you enter the battle. Since most of their forces are focused on defending two areas, only a few monsters will be left to fight against you. If those catastrophe-grade beasts wouldn't come out, they would have to give up on their outer walls and move further back. Whether they choose to reveal themselves or not, it will be a win for us." Alaric was no longer the weak warrior that he was in his past life. He had gone through numerous battles and he had seen all sorts of military tactics used on the battlefield. This was merely one of the many tricks he learned from those experiences. Looking at his son's calm expression, Lucas smiled faintly. "You have become more dependable, son." Hearing this, Alaric smiled and shook his head. "I still have a lot to learn." An hour into the battle. Just as Alaric had predicted, the monsters had focused their attention on Vulcan's troops. Just then, a signal was released to the sky. It was a signal for Garandel's troops to take action. Leading a force of 50,000 soldiers, Garandel attacked the northern side of the outer walls. While he was watching the battle intently, Lucas asked, "What if those catastrophe-grade beasts were to attack now?" Alaric had already taken this into consideration. It was indeed possible for those beasts to reveal themselves to help the monsters defend the outer layers. "Don't worry, Dad. Zephyr is on standby for that reason," he reassured his father. "So you also calculated that, huh?" Lucas was pleased with his response. 2 hours into the battle, the outer walls were still going strong. Surprisingly, the monsters managed to resist the two-pronged attack, but there were also signs of collapse in their formations. Given the situation, their defenses were bound to fall apart in a few more hours. By then, both Vulcan's and Garandel's troops would be able to breach the outer walls. "Are you going to sit out of today's battle?" Lucas stared at his son. Alaric let out a sigh and nodded. "I promised the survivors of the scouting team that I would wait for them." Hearing this, Lucas was taken aback. "I thought you were sending them back to the Elven Kingdom after fulfilling their task." "That was the plan, but—" Alaric shook his head helplessly. "It appears that they had developed a deep grudge with those monsters. I can't blame them. Watching your comrades die in front of you isn't so easy to overcome no matter how hard you try to forget them." His words trailed off. Lucas noticed the fluctuations in his eyes. It was as if Alaric had also said those words for himself. Lucas let out a deep sigh. His son was just like him during his younger days. One's trauma was indeed hard to forget. Half an hour later, the battle had reached a crucial point. "Dad, it's about time," Alaric suddenly said. Lucas nodded his head. Before leaving, he tapped his son's shoulder and said, "Alaric, we are born in troubled times. Don't blame yourself for the deaths of your men. We are only trying our best to survive and to make our country a better place for our people." After saying those words, Lucas disappeared with a whoosh. His father's words resonated deeply in his heart. Lucas was right, but how could it be so easy to forget the deaths of his subordinates? Especially when he had seen 2 lifetimes' worth of war and bloodshed. While he was immersed in his own thoughts, Lucas and his troops had already stepped onto the battlefield. Their loud war cries resounded across the forest. The monsters didn't expect their attack, so they weren't able to put up a proper defense against Lucas's troops. With a mythical knight leading them, Lucas's troops quickly breached the outer walls. It only took them half an hour. Suddenly, a large number of monsters came out of the nest. Leading them was a weird-looking ogre with 2 heads and 4 arms. Do you want to use appraisal on the selected target? Yes. No. Alaric subconsciously clicked yes upon seeing the creature. 2-headed ogre warrior, catastrophe grade XP. 999/10,000. Potential S. Innate ability. Innate divine strength S. Strong body S. Voracious eater S. Elemental resistance A. Ferocious spirit A. Hunting A, strength 751. Stamina 522. Agility 566. Vitality 812. Endurance 757.
Mana 588.
So it has finally appeared. Alaric narrowed his eyes. The monster's attributes were the highest he had seen. It was even higher than Dudu's. However, Alaric wasn't worried. His father wasn't just a simple mythical knight. Just when comparing stats, they were about similar, but there was something about Lucas that made him superior to the ogre. An SSS-Rank trait. Other than Dudu, I thought I was the only one who had it, but Alaric looked at his father's peerless figure with a hint of a smile. Chapter 414. Lucas's stats. Lucas Silversword, Mythical Knight EXP. 119/10,000. Potential SS. Traits. Auto Defense, SSS. Swordsmanship, SS. Shield Mastery, SS. Close Combat, S. Intuition, S. Pain Tolerance, S. Strength, 640. Stamina, 660. Agility, 630. Vitality, 712. Endurance, 700.
Mana 600.
Alaric couldn't help but feel amazed every time he saw this. He wasn't sure what this auto-defense trait was, so he couldn't tell what it was for. However, he knew that his father could protect himself against the ogre. He was certain of it. What he was worried about was how many more catastrophe-grade beasts were hiding in the nest. The system wouldn't just set the difficulty into hell mode for no reason. There aren't 3 catastrophe-grade beasts, right? Alaric thought to himself, but there was a high chance that this could be the case. At this moment, Lucas and the monster had already engaged in close combat. So there was indeed a catastrophe-grade beast. Alaric's hunch was right. Lucas thought to himself as he looked at the towering monster before him. It possessed the unique aura that could overwhelm weaker beings, but he was already immune to this. Its aura is weaker than Zephyr's. He scoffed in his heart as he adjusted his battle stance. Suddenly, as if the monster sensed his disdain, it pounced upon him and raised its massive fists while gathering mana into its arms. Roar!
Filthy Human Warrior, D.
Seeing this, Lucas wasn't flustered. He was confident in his defense. He raised his shield above him while imbuing mana into it to activate its engraved ability.
Bang!
The ogre's fists slammed into Lucas's shield, causing a violent explosion that sent shockwaves across the forest. Everyone around them was flung away by the fierce winds, leaving the area around Lucas and the ogre empty. Sturdy, but it's not fast. Lucas changed his approach after analyzing the monster's abilities. The ogre was powerful, but it lacked in agility. Lucas wanted to make use of his advantage in speed to gradually tire out his opponent. The two clashed in the next few minutes, but it was mostly the ogre on the offensive end. It released a series of devastating punches that turned the surroundings into a mess. Each of its strikes could kill a transcendent knight, but Lucas managed to block them with ease. Bang! Bang! Cowardly human! Stop running away and fight me properly! The two-headed ogre roared. From the expression on its 2 faces, Lucas could tell that it was incredibly pissed. However, he couldn't care less. Pathetic! He snorted. Furious at his response, the ogre rushed towards him with heavy strides. The ground seemed to tremble with each step it took. Upon gaining momentum, it raised its fists and hammered them down upon Lucas. D. This monster isn't smart, so it's definitely not the one making their tactics. Could there really be another one catastrophe-grade beast like Alaric had said? After fighting with the ogre, Lucas realized that its intelligence was lacking for its level. This led him to believe that there was another monster on the same level as the ogre hiding within the nest. Bang! Bang! As the battle progressed, the two-headed ogre warrior became even more enraged. No matter how hard it tried, it couldn't penetrate Lucas's shield. Human warrior, you are like a cockroach. I hate cockroaches. The ogre stomped its massive foot, causing fissures to appear on the ground. Lucas frowned and planted his feet firmly to stabilize his footing. Is it trying to destroy the surroundings so I wouldn't be able to move around? It seems like I have underestimated its intelligence. It still knows how to think. He grinned. While he was fighting with the two-headed ogre warrior, the troops led by Garandel and Vulcan had already breached the northern and southern sides of the outer walls. More monsters came out of the nest to resist them, but both armies were quick to react to the situation. They formed defensive lines to slow down the monsters' advance and slowly whittle down the enemy's strength. After an hour, the two-headed ogre warrior, which had been aggressively fighting Lucas, suddenly stopped and revealed a confused expression. Lucas was baffled by its actions. Is it communicating with someone? He noticed that the ogre was unusually quiet. Its mouth was moving, but no sound could be heard. Mental communication. How? He was stunned. Mental communication was a trait unique to some spirit-type monsters. It was an ability that allows them to mentally communicate with anyone. It might sound unimpressive, but it was an ability that no ordinary monster could possess. So there is a spirit-type monster in the nest. Lucas's face darkened. Unlike physical-type monsters like the two-headed ogre warrior that focuses on physical combat, spirit-type beasts were capable of using spirit-based attacks like illusions, hypnosis, and even curses. Defending against these attacks was more difficult since you wouldn't be able to see them. Unless someone had equipment that could block these unusual abilities, one could only resist them through willpower and mental strength. Lucas was confident that he could resist such attacks, but the same couldn't be said to the others. Someone with weak willpower and mental strength would easily fall into an illusion. They would also be unable to resist a curse and die without even knowing what had killed them. This is trickier than I imagined. I need to inform the others. Thinking about this, he raised his fist and decisively shouted, "Sound the horns! We are retreating!" The warriors were surprised by his commands, but they still complied. In the next moment, the sounds of war horns echoed, signaling their retreat. Garandel's and Vulcan's troops also heard the signal. Although perplexed, they chose to abandon the walls they had overtaken and retreated to their camp. When the three armies converged, both Garandel and Vulcan immediately questioned Lucas's decision. "Venerable, why did you ask us to retreat? We have already taken control of their walls, so we only need to hold the position and force them to retreat to their nest." Garandel asked with a frown. "I know you are confused. I will tell you everything later." Lucas replied in a grim tone. Chapter 415. Spirit-type catastrophe-grade beast. Upon returning to the camp, Lucas gathered all the highest-ranking military officers. "Venerable, everyone is here now," Garandel told Lucas after all the military officers had arrived. Hearing this, Lucas nodded and cleared his throat to gather everyone's attention. With all eyes on him, Lucas spoke. "I know all of you are confused by the sudden call for retreat when we are close to victory." He paused and scanned everyone's faces before he continued. "However, if we hadn't retreated earlier, many of our soldiers would have died." When he said those words, the military officers frowned. Looking at their confused faces, Lucas explained, "When I was fighting with the catastrophe-grade ogre, I noticed that it was mentally communicating with someone. It was reluctant to stop fighting, but it still chose to retreat. Do you understand what that means?" "What? Is there really something that can command a creature at that level? If it's a creature capable of mental communication, that means it's a spirit-type beast." Garandel's expression darkened. "And not just a simple spirit-type beast. It should be a catastrophe-grade monster too. one that is more powerful than that ogre. Otherwise, a stubborn monster like the ogre wouldn't listen to its orders. Vulcan chimed in, his expression unsightly to behold. This wasn't good news for them. When they were starting to panic, Lucas's calm voice suddenly drifted into their ears. There is no need to panic, everyone. Everyone turned their heads to look at him. We still have a catastrophe-grade beast on our side, and I can assure you that it is way stronger than the ogre. Lucas smiled faintly. Is what you said true, Venerable? A transcendent knight barbarian warrior asked. Lucas nodded. I won't lie to you about this. The ogre may be powerful physically, but it's slow for a catastrophe-grade beast. Moreover, its usage of mana is also very simple since it relies mostly on its raw power. If it wasn't for the spirit-type beast, I would have slain that ogre. Lucas's voice was filled with confidence, making everyone reassured. So the only problem here is that spirit-type beast, huh? Vulcan crossed his arms seemingly in deep thought. The others also fell silent. What do you think we should do, Venerable? Garandel asked. Lucas held the final say here since he was the strongest fighting force. The Draconic Lion was also under House Silversword's control. Even though he was an elven royalty, his status was meaningless in front of absolute power. Lucas rubbed his chin with a thoughtful look. He tried to come up with a plan, but he found himself stumped. He had faced spirit-type beasts before, but never had he fought one at the catastrophe grade. In the end, he turned his head to his son and asked, Alaric, do you have any ideas? Everyone turned their gazes to Alaric. Sensing everyone gazes, Alaric was silent for a moment. So it was a spirit-type beast capable of controlling catastrophe-grade monsters. No wonder the difficulty was set to hell mode. This isn't a kind of monster that can be defeated with mere martial power. There is also a possibility that the two-headed ogre warrior isn't the only catastrophe-grade beast under its control. After some time, Alaric lifted his head, took a deep breath, and opened his mouth. We all know that facing a spirit-type beast is dangerous, especially to those with low willpower and mental strength. If we want to defeat it, we have two choices. One is to use the same method we did earlier. We can force it to come out by sending Zephyr to join the battle. The second way is to concentrate our attack in one place and brute force our way through the nest. This method is very risky and there might be high casualties on our side. However, the spirit-type beast wouldn't expect us to use this method, so it's highly likely that we will catch it unprepared. Everyone ruminated on his words. The second method is out of the question. It's very dangerous. I don't want to sacrifice my subordinates for a mere chance. Garandel expressed his disapproval of the second method. Some military officers nodded in agreement. They also believed it to be dangerous and not worth the risk. So that leaves us with the first method. But will it fall for the same scheme? Vulcan raised an eyebrow, feeling skeptical of the idea. At this moment, Lucas seemed to have understood something and said, Of course not, but it will have no choice but to show itself. So do we all agree with doing the first method? Alaric glanced at everyone present. Most of the military officers expressed their approval. Vulcan and Garandel also supported the plan. In that case, let us discuss how we are going to execute this strategy. Lucas sent Alaric a knowing look. With his father's encouraging look, Alaric told everyone his plans. A long discussion followed afterwards. At this moment, Ivana was also in the meeting room, but she was only one of the many listeners. She didn't even have the authority to express her opinion. Looking at Alaric calmly discussing with her father and the rest of the highest-ranking military officers, she didn't want to admit it, but she found herself admiring his abilities. If only he hadn't. She shook off her random thoughts and focused her attention on the meeting. Our kingdom comes first before me. She tried to convince herself to forget her feelings. She lowered her head and gently touched the bracelet on her left wrist. Initially, Ivana thought about throwing it away, but she couldn't bear to do it. She felt that it might be her last memento of him, so she chose to keep it. Why is it hard to forget you? Her shoulders trembled as she lifted her head to look at Alaric's face. As if sensing her gaze, Alaric glanced in her direction, but he quickly averted his gaze. Ivana felt uncomfortable. She hardened her gaze and muttered to herself, "I can do this. I will try to move on." Chapter 416. Two monsters emerge from the nest. On the third day of the battle, the same method was used to besiege the outer walls of the monster nest. This time, the monsters only briefly resisted before they retreated to their second defensive position. The two-headed ogre warrior that fought with Lucas yesterday didn't even appear. It was as if the monsters had given up on defending the outer walls. The army occupied the walls and isolated the monsters, trapping them within their nest. And so, the third day of the battle ended in such a manner. Inside Alaric's tent, Lucas came to visit him. Why did they give up on the outer wall? Hearing this, Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. He was also confused. With the monsters trapped in the nest, they would have no way of searching for food. They would eventually starve to death, which would gradually weaken their soldiers. Suddenly, Alaric seemed to have realized something. "Don't tell me, Dad. Have you seen what the monsters did with the corpses?" Alaric asked with a serious expression. Lucas thought for a moment and replied, "I didn't join the battle earlier, but I heard from our soldiers that they saw the monsters dragging the corpses into their nest." While he was saying this, he understood what Alaric was thinking. "You don't mean?" Alaric nodded with a grim look. "It seems like they are planning to satiate their hunger by eating the corpses of their brethren." Lucas's face darkened. "I should have thought that they would do something like this. Monsters will always be monsters." They had overlooked this crucial information. Alaric let out a deep sigh. With the food problem solved, the monsters would be able to fight in their best condition. "No matter, we will proceed as planned," he muttered coldly. Lucas nodded with a stern look. On the fourth day of the battle, they finally used the same method they used on the second day. Garandel and Vulcan led 50,000 warriors each to attack the northern and southern sides of the monster nest. Lucas also led his troops to capture the central position of the nest. As they had anticipated, the two-headed ogre warrior appeared with its minions to block their path. "Human warrior, you will die by my hands today," the monster roared at Lucas before charging towards him like a mad bull. His heavy steps left deep imprints on the ground. In the next moment, Lucas and the ogre clashed violently. Bang! A fearsome shockwave erupted, sending debris flying in all directions. "I wanted to kill you on my own. Unfortunately, I brought someone with me." Lucas smirked. His smile made the ogre feel uncomfortable. Just then, a draconic roar echoed from the sky. "HM?" The ogre lifted its heads and saw a massive creature circling above them. Upon sensing the beast's aura, the ogre's two faces darkened. "Powerful lion. I can't kill it. Roar!" The draconic lion suddenly opened its mouth and spat out flames that engulfed the monster nest in a sea of flames. No monster could defend against Zephyr's flames. Even the ogres with their powerful bodies couldn't withstand its terrifyingly potent fire and were burned to ashes. As for the other monsters, they had it worse. They didn't even last a second and were quickly reduced to dust. The powerful monsters managed to resist for a while by imbuing mana into their bodies, but as soon as they ran out of mana, they also melted under the flames before turning into ashes. "Hot! So hot!" the two-headed ogre warrior screamed after being bombarded with Zephyr's flames. Unlike the other monsters, it was able to defend itself. However, the unbearable heat still made it feel uncomfortable. "I don't like this." It grabbed a huge boulder and threw it towards the draconic lion. Whoosh! Zephyr seemed to have anticipated the attack. It flapped its wings and evaded the boulder. After missing its target, the ogre was enraged. It wanted to throw another boulder, but it suddenly sensed a threat behind it. With a turn of its body, it saw Lucas rushing towards it while swinging his sword. Despicable human! The ogre instinctively imbued mana into its arms to defend itself. Bang! Surprisingly, its arms managed to block the attack, but Lucas's sword was able to penetrate deeply, causing two of its arms to bleed excessively. The monster's two faces revealed a pained look. Lucas clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Its muscles and bones are surprisingly tough." My sword can't even cut off its arms. While thinking about this, he imbued more mana into his sword, activating its engraved ability. The ogre received deep lacerations and was thrown away from the impact. At this moment, Zephyr suddenly swooped down and opened its mouth, spewing flames at the ogre. Gra! The ogre's body was engulfed by the flames. Zazie! Roar! The monster screamed as the flames slowly burned its body. It covered itself with mana, but the searing flames penetrated through and viciously burned its skin. Such fearsome flames! Lucas watched the scene with a hint of fear. He was glad that the draconic lion wasn't an enemy. While he was watching the ogre struggle under the flames, two creatures suddenly emerged from the nest. The moment they appeared, Lucas felt the intense aura they exuded. These auras, he turned his head and saw two monsters approaching them. One was a purple-skinned goblin with 4 wings on its back. Lucas felt that it held an uncanny resemblance to the winged goblin monarch he had fought several months ago. The only exception was that this monster was a true catastrophe-grade beast. Meanwhile, the second monster was a lot smaller. It looked like a mix between a kobold and a goblin. It was a bipedal, green-skinned monster with a reptilian-like tail. Its head was so big that it was disproportionately larger than its body. Although it looked ugly, Lucas felt that it was more dangerous compared to the two-headed ogre warrior and the winged goblin monarch. Is that the spirit-type beast? His face turned grim. Chapter 417, The Half-Kobold Monster. The winged goblin monarch released a burst of wind from its palm to extinguish the flames on the two-headed ogre warrior's body. Whoosh! What? Lucas was stunned. It actually managed to extinguish the draconic lion's flames with just one move. Stand back. Don't come closer. Lucas warned his troops while keeping his eyes on the catastrophe-grade monsters. The warriors didn't question his orders and retreated to a safe distance. Their instincts were screaming at them that the two monsters that had emerged from the nest were formidable beasts. It would be unwise for them to approach Lucas as they would only be a hindrance. After warning his troops, Zephyr landed before Lucas and growled at him as if it wanted to say something. Lucas was baffled. He couldn't understand what it was trying to say. Zephyr revealed a look of dissatisfaction, but it lowered its body and called out softly to Lucas. I understand now. You want me to ride on your back. Lucas finally realized what it was trying to convey. The draconic lion nodded its head. Seeing this, Lucas no longer hesitated. With a whoosh, he jumped onto Zephyr's back. Roar! The draconic lion let out an ear-piercing roar that shook the forest. It then flew into the sky and circled above the catastrophe-grade beasts, eyeing them coldly with its beastly eyes. Lucas could see the whole battlefield from his viewpoint. We must kill those monsters to win this battle. Thinking about this, he brandished his sword and released a fearsome gust of wind that rotated like a sharp blade. Whoosh! The winged goblin monarch imbued mana into its arm and summoned its own innate ability. It conjured a terrifying wind that clashed against Lucas's wind blade. Boom! As soon as the two attacks collided, the air exploded. A violent shockwave erupted, causing small debris to fly in all directions. Lucas's cape fluttered vigorously as he looked down at the winged goblin monarch. Just like the monster he had faced several months ago, this thing was also overwhelmingly powerful. This will be a hard battle. He took a deep breath as he communicated with Zephyr. Zephyr, let's focus our attack on that ogre. It's already exhausted, so it won't be able to defend itself. Upon hearing his words, Zephyr roared and swooped down like an eagle. Whoosh! It opened its mouth and spat out a breath of flames. Meanwhile, Lucas focused his attacks on the winged goblin monarch to prevent it from protecting the ogre. With a series of wind blades, the winged goblin monarch was forced to defend itself. At this moment, the ogre was about to be engulfed by flames when a mana barrier suddenly appeared around it, encasing its body like an indestructible shield. Boom! Is that half-kobold monster? Lucas frowned after witnessing the scene. As if sensing his gaze, the half-kobold monster lifted its huge head and smirked at him. Human, do you think we can't kill you because you're riding that lion? A voice suddenly echoed in his mind, startling him. Mental communication. Lucas's face darkened as he looked at the half-kobold. Out of nowhere, an oppressive aura came crushing upon them like a collapsing mountain. Zephyr was caught unprepared by the suppressive force. It tried to resist the suppression, but it soon plunged to the ground under the crushing pressure. Zephyr! Lucas shouted and helped the beast overcome the pressure, but it was futile. The draconic lion fell heavily to the ground. Bang! Lucas managed to save himself, but the draconic lion wasn't as lucky. After falling from such a height, it broke almost half of its bones. If it hadn't cushioned its fall with mana, it would have been left half dead. Zephyr! Lucas rushed to the creature and checked its injuries. Oh no! With its wounds, it would be difficult for it to fly anytime soon. His face fell. Suddenly, Lucas raised an eyebrow and twisted his body to the side. Bang! He turned his head and saw the winged goblin monarch retracting its long, sharp claws. Can I even defeat these monsters now that Zephyr is wounded? Lucas stared deeply at the approaching winged goblin monarch. This thing is already bad news, and there is still that beast waiting for the opportunity to attack me. While thinking about this, he glanced at the half-kobold that was watching them with interest. What should I do? Lucas furrowed his eyebrows, sweat trickling down his face. All of a sudden, the winged goblin monarch pounced at him and swiped its claws. Whoosh! The force behind its claws caused the air to fluctuate intensely. Facing its attack, Lucas lifted his shield and imbued it with his mana to activate its engraved ability. Screech! A terrible scraping sound echoed as its claws struck his shield. Lucas's feet were buried deeply in the ground due to the strong force. Gritting his teeth, he pushed off the creature with his shield and took a huge leap backward to gain some distance. He looked down and saw deep claw marks on the surface of his shield. This was a relic, but the winged goblin monarch almost penetrated through his defenses. I can't defeat it on my own. Just then, he felt a presence behind him. He instinctively rolled to the side and narrowly evaded the punch of the two-headed ogre warrior. Bang! A deep crater was formed on the place where he just stood. How can it still move? He looked at the severely injured ogre in surprise. Its body was covered in ugly burn marks. One of its heads was also covered in pus and blood, making it look more hideous.
Human warrior, D.
Enraged, the two-headed ogre charged at him and swung its fists aggressively. Lucas nimbly evaded its punches. He could block them with his shield, but he didn't want to waste his mana. How can it be this strong when it's already severely wounded? Lucas found himself in a tough spot now that two catastrophe-grade monsters had teamed up against him. Chapter 418. Alaric joins the battle. Lucas fought continuously with the winged goblin monarch and the two-headed ogre, while also keeping an eye on the half-kobold. This is driving me nuts. Exhaustion had caught up to him. He could feel his stamina dwindling as the battle continued. His mana also couldn't keep up with his usage. My mana will be depleted if this goes on, he thought to himself. While he was fighting with the two monsters, Zephyr lifted its injured body to help him, but a figure suddenly blocked its path. It was the half-kobold. You aren't allowed to interfere, stupid lion. The half-kobold snorted and used telekinesis to lift a huge boulder and throw it towards Zephyr. Whoosh! The draconic lion opened its mouth and spat out a breath of flames at the boulder. Upon contact with its flames, the boulder gradually melted and turned into magma before it fell to the ground. Oh! The half-kobold raised an eyebrow and raised its slender arm to conjure an invisible spirit arrow. After gathering enough power, it swung its arm and released the spirit arrow towards Zephyr. The draconic lion couldn't perceive its attack, but it could still feel it through its powerful senses. With nimble movements, it leaped to the side to avoid the spirit arrow. Bang! The spirit arrow left a long and deep pit on the ground. Seeing this, Zephyr let out a furious roar. Roar! Noisy! The half-kobold seemed to be displeased and conjured 5 spirit arrows successively. With a wave of its arm, the 5 spirit arrows shot towards Zephyr with deadly speed. Su! 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 Zephyr tried to flap its wings, but it was unable to fly. In the end, it could only evade the spirit arrows by running in zigzag motion. It managed to avoid for spirit arrows, but one arrow struck its hind leg, making it stumble and fall to the ground. It rolled several times before it collapsed onto a big tree with a bang. Zephyr! Lucas saw this and wanted to help it, but the winged goblin monarch and the two-headed ogre quickly blocked his path. If Zephyr died here, there would be no one to stop that half-kobold monster. Venerable, we are here to help. A voice suddenly drifted into his ears. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Garandel and Vulcan leading their troops towards him. Those fools.
No.
Don't come here. You will only get in my way, he shouted furiously. However, the two ignored his warnings and led their troops to attack the two-headed ogre warrior. Stop looking down on us, Lucas, Vulcan shouted back at him with a snort. His words stunned Lucas and he was unable to retort. We will take care of this ogre. You go and deal with that thing. Vulcan grinned at him. Hearing this, Lucas could only helplessly smile. This bastard. Still as stubborn as always. With Garandel's and Vulcan's troops joining the fray, the pressure on Lucas significantly decreased. I will leave the ogre to you guys. Please be careful. After giving them a warning, Lucas pounced on the winged goblin monarch and engaged in brutal combat with the beast. Meanwhile, Alaric had also joined the battle against the two-headed ogre warrior. Against a catastrophe-grade beast, they had to gang up on it using their numbers. However, despite being severely injured and surrounded by enemies, the two-headed ogre unleashed a deadly carnage. It wildly swung its arms, killing dozens of warriors with each strike. Even elite knights couldn't defend against its fists and were killed in just one move. Such fearsome power. Alaric frowned. I will take the front and attract its attention. You guys try to deal as much damage to that beast. Vulcan shouted as he urged his horse to move ahead of the group. As his horse galloped towards the ogre, the others rushed on either side of the monster, flanking it from both sides to confuse it. Pesky bugs! The two-headed ogre roared and released a burst of mana as it threw a series of punches. Each punch left a deep crater on the ground and whoever was struck by its fist was turned into a meat paste. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of warriors were killed, leaving the surroundings filled with mangled corpses and puddles of blood. At this moment, Vulcan suddenly appeared before the ogre and shouted, I'm here, you ugly piece of shit. The ogre was provoked by his words. It turned its heads and focused its attention on him.
Smelly Barbarian Warrior, die.
Vulcan took a deep breath and braced himself for the impact. The ogre's fists came crushing upon him. He quickly lifted his shield and imbued a large portion of his mana to improve its defense. Bang! 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 Each punch caused his internal organs to twist and turn. Blood leaked out from the corner of his lips, but he gritted his teeth and bore through the pain. Now! He roared. At this moment, Alaric, Garandel, and a few more transcendent knights and 3 ringed beast soul masters suddenly appeared around the ogre. They simultaneously attacked the beast from all directions while it was still occupied by Vulcan. The two-headed ogre was struck, but it managed to defend the vital parts of its body. Roar! It let out a pained roar as it fell on its knees. It might have blocked its vital parts, but their attacks still left deep wounds on its body. One more! Garandel shouted as he pulled the reins of his horse, forcing it to change direction. Alaric gathered mana into his swords and performed his sword techniques. A wave of dazzling light followed as his sword stabbed into the ogre's chest. CHCK. The others also managed to hit the beast, but its resilient body withstood their attacks. I will kill you all. The ogre wreaked havoc and slaughtered all the warriors in its path. No one could block its path, and those who tried were ruthlessly killed. Alaric was also flung away from the impact and slammed into a tree with a bang. Lifting his body, Alaric wiped off the blood on his lips and glared at the ogre. Chapter 419, once again using the Frost Edge domain. It's already in poor condition, but it still managed to kill thousands of our warriors. If it were in its peak state, we wouldn't be able to harm it in the slightest, thought Alaric as he stimulated his energy core to gather more mana. While he was gathering his energy, Garandel and the other experts had once again attacked the two-headed ogre. They fought relentlessly, but despite the injuries it had accumulated, the ogre remained standing, proud and strong. Vulcan, who had taken most of the damage, could barely stand on his feet. He was breathing heavily, and it looked like he would fall at any moment. Seeing that the situation was dire, Alaric could no longer afford to wait. "I'm going all out. I will use that technique now." He rushed towards the two-headed ogre and shouted, "Everyone, please step back." Hearing his words, Garandel and the others were surprised. Everyone glanced at the Elven King and Vulcan, awaiting their decision. Although both leaders were baffled, they decided to believe in him. "Everyone, stand back," Garandel shouted to his troops. "Barbarian warriors, retreat." Vulcan also ordered his troops to retreat. With the path now cleared, Alaric communicated with the ice element from his surroundings to activate a skill. He had only used this technique in the Battle of Ackland Pass. Frost Edge Domain. Upon executing the technique, the grasslands slowly turned into ice and the temperature gradually. The 500-meter radius around Alaric suddenly became a land of ice, and every piece of ice in this domain was within his control. "Roar! Why is it cold? What have you done?" The two-headed ogre warrior roared and stomped on the ice underneath its feet. Bang! Bang! Fragments of ice exploded under its furious stomping. "It's trying to destroy my domain using brute force. I must stop it." Using his ability to control ice, 100 ice warriors emerged. Each of them carried a sword of ice, and they all had the aura of an elite knight. The two-headed ogre warrior unleashed its fury upon the ice warriors. It charged towards them and bulldozed its way with unstoppable force. The ice warriors broke apart under its fearsome power, but some of them also managed to stab its body with their swords. Alaric summoned more ice warriors to replace those that had been destroyed. "Using this technique is quickly draining my mana, but this will also lessen our casualties." He gritted his teeth, his face covered in sweat. His energy core was rampaging because of how fast his mana was being expended. The rapid exhaustion of his mana brought him immense fatigue and discomfort, but he pushed through without hesitation. At this moment, Garandel and the others were stupefied by the shocking sight. They could never fathom that such fearsome ability actually existed. Furthermore, the one performing the technique was someone more than half their age. "Unbelievable. He truly is Lucas's son. What a lucky bastard he is to have such an amazing son," Vulcan mumbled in shock. A transcendent knight fighting against a catastrophe-grade beast all on his own. This was unheard of. "Quick! We must help him," shouted Garandel after snapping out of his shock. Hearing his words, Vulcan snapped back into reality and immediately commanded his troops. "Take out your bows and aim for that beast. Fire at will." The warriors who had brought their bows immediately took aim and released their arrows. Su! Su!
Su!
Thousands of arrows cast a shadow over the sky. In the blink of an eye, the arrows rained down upon the two-headed ogre. The monster noticed the arrows, but it was surrounded by numerous ice warriors that stuck to its body like glue. "Get out of my way! Annoying bugs!" It roared furiously while trying to force its way out. However, the ice warriors clung to its body and prevented it from escaping. "Do you think this is enough to stop me?" Enraged, the two-headed ogre warrior unleashed the remaining mana in its body, temporarily giving it the strength to overpower the hundreds of ice warriors. Even so, it was still a step too late. The thousands of arrows came falling and penetrated its body. CHKK. CHK. The two-headed ogre covered its head with its arms, making it somehow survive the barrage of arrows. It staggered and let out an earth-shaking roar filled with agony. "Roar!" Some of the arrows stuck in its body fell to the ground. The two-headed ogre turned its head and locked its gaze on Alaric. "It's you. I will kill you first." Covered in blood, it charged towards Alaric with heavy steps. Alaric grabbed his temple. He felt a terrible headache after overusing his energy core. I need to evade it. Ignoring the pain all over his body, he jumped to the side, but the two-headed ogre suddenly changed direction, clearly intent on killing him. Shit, I can only block it. He gathered more mana from his energy core and imbued it into his swords. He could no longer maintain the Frost Edge domain, so he could only perform a normal sword technique. Just when the beast was about to ram into him, Alaric abruptly stabbed out his swords. Whoosh! Chhk. Chhk. His swords pierced through the monster's tough skin, but the ogre also managed to slam into Alaric's body and send him crashing into multiple trees. Your Highness! Alaric! The two-headed ogre warrior looked down at the swords that had stabbed its chest. Arg! Its vision suddenly darkened before it collapsed heavily onto the ground with a thud. Quick! Find Alaric and check his condition, Vulcan shouted to his troops. He then turned his head to Garandel and said, Let's go check the ogre. Garandel nodded with a grim look. While the warriors were searching for Alaric, Garandel, Vulcan, and a few other experts cautiously approached the two-headed ogre's body. Vulcan was the first one to get near its body, and to his alarm, he noticed that it was still breathing. It's still alive. Chapter 420. A miracle. Kill it now. Stab it with your weapons. Vulcan shouted as he stabbed his sword into the monster's head. Chhk. Garandel and the other experts didn't hesitate. They swung their weapons and repeatedly stabbed the ogre's vital organs. After an entire minute of continuous stabbing, they finally stopped. Vulcan poked the ogre's head using his sword. It's no longer moving. He let out a sigh of relief. I will check its heartbeat just in case. Garandel jumped onto the monster's chest and placed his palm on its body. After a few seconds of silence, he shook his head. It's dead. Everyone relaxed upon hearing his words. Just to kill an injured catastrophe-grade beast, almost 10 transcendents were killed. Moreover, more than 10,000 warriors also perished. Vulcan took a deep breath and turned his head. The battle isn't over yet. They followed his gaze and saw Lucas defending the injured Zephyr from the remaining 2 catastrophe-grade monsters. The venerable one whom they thought had an indestructible body was now covered in wounds. His shield had already been destroyed and his armor was covered in holes and claw marks. On the other hand, the 2 catastrophe-grade beasts didn't seem to be injured. Only the winged goblin monarch appeared to be slightly exhausted, but other than that, it looked completely fine. We need to help Lucas, Vulcan muttered, his expression unsightly. Can we really kill those beasts? It took us great effort to kill this thing even though it was severely wounded. How can we defeat those 2 when they are still in great condition? A barbarian transcendent knight hesitated. Vulcan turned his head and glared at the person who had spoken. If Lucas is killed here, we are all going to die. Calm down, everyone. This is not the time to fight amongst ourselves. Garandel quickly stepped in. Vulcan snorted. He looked at the experts around him and shouted, Follow me to help Lucas. Without waiting for their response, he rushed out with quick steps. The barbarian warriors followed him, including the guy who had hesitated earlier. What should we do, Your Majesty? Neo glanced at the Elven King. The rest of the Elven warriors also stared at Garandel, waiting for his decision. With a fierce look, Garandel responded, We are joining the battle. With a wave of his hand, he commanded, Gather the troops and tell them to attack the catastrophe-grade beasts. Yes, Your Majesty. With Garandel taking the lead, the Elven army rushed over to join the battle. Meanwhile, Alaric was now lying beneath a collapsed tree. He tried to gather his mana, but his energy core suddenly vibrated and sent a wave of pain all over his body. Arg! He grimaced. It felt as if his body was being burned by scorching hot flames. It was so unbearable that he wanted to scream. The ogre's last attack must have damaged my energy core. Damn it! He gritted his teeth and tried to lift his beaten body to no avail. In the end, he collapsed weakly, exhausted and out of breath. Blood leaked out at the corner of his lips, but he didn't even have the energy to lift his arm and wipe it off. I'm losing consciousness. He thought to himself, his eyes becoming heavier by the second. Your Highness Alaric. He could hear the distant sound of someone looking for him. I'm here. That was what he wanted to say, but he had no energy to utter a word. Suddenly, Alaric, where are you? A familiar voice drifted into his ears right when he was about to lose consciousness. Ivana, why does she sound so worried? Those were his last thoughts before he passed out. At this moment, an elven warrior finally found Alaric. He is here. His Highness Alaric is here, he shouted to the others. Everyone immediately rushed in his direction, including Ivana, who was nearby. Alaric.
No.
A wave of fear, regret, and sadness gripped her heart when she saw Alaric's body. She rushed to his side and cried, her face filled with remorse. Alaric? Her voice trembled as she called out to him, but he didn't respond. Your Highness, please step aside. I will check his pulse. An elven warrior cautiously said as he crouched beside her. Ivana took a deep breath. Right, his pulse. She moved to the side and let the elven warrior check Alaric's pulse. She looked nervous as she waited in silence. As time ticked by, her anxiety intensified. Give me some space, the elven warrior shouted while gesturing at everyone not to come closer. Everyone stopped in their tracks and watched the scene, their faces showing various emotions. The elven warrior who was checking Alaric's pulse suddenly frowned. Seeing this, Ivana's face fell. His pulse has stopped. Quick! Call a healer here. No! Ivana pushed the elven warrior aside and lifted Alaric's body. She used her nature's blessing to facilitate his healing, but her ability didn't work. Everyone sighed upon seeing this. He is a transcendent knight. He won't die so easily. Ivana looked at Alaric's face, distraught. She wiped off the blood on his lips, her tears falling. Just then, the bracelet on her wrist suddenly lit up. She raised her eyebrow in surprise. What is going on? Why did the bracelet react? Ivana seemed to have realized something. She gently placed Alaric on the ground and took off the bracelet. She didn't know why, but she felt that it could help him. As soon as she placed the bracelet on his wrist, a powerful healing ability was activated. That is an equipment engraved with superior healing ability, someone exclaimed. Everyone was pleasantly surprised as they watched Alaric's wounds gradually recover. They could see the lacerations closing up, leaving only scars on his body. His bruises also vanished like they were never there. It was a miracle. Ivana watched this with great anticipation, anxiety, and joy. Please wake up. Suddenly, Alaric opened his eyes. He looked disoriented and confused. It was then that he noticed Ivana crying next to him. Ivana!